Hello, welcome everyone to the 2023 Farmer Grant webinar. I am Vander Gack. I'm Northeast SARE's communications specialist. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm coming to you from unceded Abenaki territory. Excited to see so many farmers interested in learning about sustainable agriculture research and education. Some quick housekeeping. I'm going to be sharing the link to our closed captioning in the chat. You can also see it there on the screen. We are going to be sending out a recording of today's webinar. Feel free to ask questions throughout in the Q&A and chat functions. We'll be pausing every now and then to take a look at those questions. Super excited to see everyone. And with that, we're going to hand it over to Candice Huber.
Thank you, Vander. And welcome, everyone. I'm Candice Huber, and I'm the coordinator for the Farmer Grant and Partnership Grant programs for Northeast SARE, and I work out of the University of Vermont in Burlington. The call is open for farmer grants, and I'm going to give you some information about the program and how to apply. So thank you for joining us today. And it was really great to see all the questions that came in with the registrations, and I'll be answering those throughout the presentation as best I can. If something by the end of the presentation isn't answered, feel free to contact me directly with your question. Also with us today is Tommye Rafes of TL Fruits and Vegetables in Caldwell, West Virginia, who's received several Northeast SARE grants, and she's going to share her experience with us in just a little bit. And I just have to fix my PowerPoint. It's not. With these screens open, I can't see what I need to see. There we go. View. And Vander, which one do I want? Reading view. There we go. All right. Got it. Thanks. So SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education and is a federally funded program through the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. There are 4 regions, and we are the Northeast region serving these 12 states and the District of Columbia. So the first criteria is that you have to be in the Northeast region. The Farmer Grant Program is one of 6 competitive grant programs that Northeast SARE has. Last year, for farmer grants, we had 63 proposals submitted and 33 of those were funded, which is a success rate of 52%. This is pretty typical and what we hope to fund this year, but it is important to know that this is a competitive grant program. SARE has another program for partnership grants, and it's very similar in that it can be the same topic. So I just want to mention that one because the applicant for that one is not a farmer. It's someone who works with farmer. So if you're listening and you are not a farmer, but you want to work with one, then the partnership grant would be for you. And the next round of partnership grants will be in 2024. And you can find out more about that program on our website. But we're going to talk about the farmer grants today. And to give you an overview, here are the basic important points about the Farmer Grant Program. Farmer grants are for commercial producers who have an innovative idea that they want to test. The projects should seek new knowledge that other farmers can use and address questions that improve the sustainability of farms. A technical advisor must be involved, and the maximum amount of funds you can request is $30,000. You will need to put together a detailed, realistic budget, and it's important to note that funds are paid on a reimbursement basis, so you or your farm need to be able to manage the costs. Projects typically run from 1 to 2 years, but can be no longer than 3. Applicants may only submit 1 proposal per year per program, and the proposal deadline is November 15th at 5 p.m., and the proposals must be submitted online. It's really important that you read and follow the instructions found in our call for proposals on our website. And I'm going to go over all of this in a little more detail. The main goal of the program is to help other farmers in the region. So for your proposal to be competitive, you want to convince the reviewers that your project will benefit sustainable agriculture. Reviewers will ultimately be looking at how your project relates to Northeast SARE outcome statement, which is agriculture in the Northeast will be diversified and profitable, providing helpful products to customers. Farmers and the people they work with will steward resources to ensure sustainability and resilience and foster conditions where farmers have high quality of life and communities can thrive. So what we'll cover today is who can apply and on what topics, what makes a good proposal, so what reviewers look for, and how to apply. Now, in order to be eligible, you not only need to be in the Northeast region, but you need to qualify as a farmer. You can be a farm owner or an employee of a farm. If you are a farm employee, there is a form that you'll need to submit that shows that the farm owner approves of the project. If you are a farmer in a nonprofit organization, you'll need the same approval from the authorized official for that organization. The farm must have the capacity to manage a grant. As I said before, the funds are provided on a reimbursement basis, so the farm needs to be able to pay for expenses and then submit an invoice to us, and it can take up to 30 days to get payment. You can see the bottom of my screen, right? I have this Zoom box blocking it on my end, but I just want to make sure you aren't missing anything on the bottom. Okay. So this grant program accepts all types and scales of farms. You may be farming on a large or small scale with organic or conventional practices, urban or rural, full or part-time, etc. But the farm that you own or work on must be a commercial operation with an established farm income of at least $1,000 per year. We use the USDA definition of a farm, which is any place from which $1,000 or more of agricultural products were produced and sold, or normally would have been sold during the census year. Now, normally would have been sold is important to note here because the USDA recognizes that some farms experience low sales in a particular year due to bad weather, disease, changes in marketing strategies, or other factors, like, say, a pandemic. So on our website, we have a document that explains this further and provides examples of what qualifies and what does not. It's called Definition of a Farm, and it explains about eligible farms and topics. Something has happened, so I can't advance my slides. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh dear. My computer seems to be locked up. Oh, there we go. Great. All right. So continuing, Northeast SARE encourages projects submitted from or in collaboration with underserved communities. Again, we go by the USDA definition, and as historically underserved audiences, they include socially disadvantaged producers, limited resources producers, beginner farmers, ranchers, and veterans. They further define socially disadvantaged farmers as belonging to groups that include Indigenous peoples, Asians, Blacks or African Americans, Hispanics, and women. And Northeast SARE also considers LGBTQIA+ farmers to be historically underserved. So before we move away from eligibility, I want to answer some of the questions that came in with registrations. So farms that are eligible would include a nonprofit urban farm, as long as it meets the eligibility requirements and sells $1,000 of produce per year. A farm that is part of an institution, again, as long as it meets that eligibility requirement. You do not need to be associated with a 501c3 organization to apply. A donation farm or community farm is eligible if you have records that the amount of produce donated is over $1,000 a year. You don't have to show any records to us, but in the application, you do need to check off a box that says that you meet the requirements. A school farming enterprise could be eligible if they operate at that commercial level and if the project would directly apply to farmers, but we do not fund K through 12 education programs. And a farmer beginning a new operation would not be eligible. Your farm must have produced $1,000 in the year prior to the grant deadline. We would not fund a farm starting from scratch. We do not provide startup funds or any capital costs such as land, buildings, or tractors. And I'll be talking more about what SARE does and does not fund a little later. But if you have any questions about whether you are eligible, feel free to contact me directly. As far as topics go, the only criteria is that it enhances agriculture in the Northeast by addressing opportunities to improve the sustainability of farms based on these themes: environmental health, profitability, conservation of natural resources, enhanced farm labor, and improved quality of life. We fund a wide range of farms, topics, and methods. Here are some examples of projects from the last couple of years: aquaculture, beekeeping or pollination, any sort of crop or livestock production, such as variety trials, cultivation methods, nutrient management, pest management, disease control. You could develop equipment or test existing equipment. You can work with certain commodities, but your project doesn't have to be commodity specific. For example, your topic could be business management, such as developing a model for a purchasing cooperative, or it could be a demonstration or education project. These are eligible as long as you develop some new educational resource or adapt existing resources to apply them to a new audience of farmers. You will be hearing about Tommye's projects, and you can also find more examples of what we have funded in our project database on our website. But whatever topic you choose, keep in mind that the project results must benefit the wider agricultural community, not just your farm. It's also important to note that any work we are funding will be made available to the public through SARE's project database. Which brings me to developing prototypes or testing a product. Product development is building a new tool and seeing if it does what you want it to do. So it's important to understand that in this case, the product plans, recipe, or design would need to be provided in the final report and would be available to the public. Product testing, however, is when you're looking to see if something that has already been developed works or can be applied in a new way. In this case, you would not need to provide the design of the product in your final report, just the results of your testing. This here is a photo of a laser scarecrow prototype that was developed by a farmer in Lakeville, Massachusetts. There were a lot of topics asked about in the questions from registration, so I'm going to just read off a list of topics that people asked about, and these are all acceptable. Specialty crops, including medicinal herbs, crop production in a high tunnel or any sort of season extension, vertical agriculture and controlled environment, hydroponics, agroforestry, buffalo, composting, water quality and climate change mitigation, infrastructure and cold chain management, payment for eco services to underserved community, solar energy for agricultural production, biogas, agritourism. We do encourage novel ideas, and variations or building on previous grant recipients' work is acceptable. Someone asked, the program references exploring or applying known ideas with new communities. So what does this mean? Well, an example would be high tunnels. Maybe high tunnels have been tested a lot in northern states in our region, but maybe not as much in Maryland or Delaware or West Virginia. So you could do trials in these different climates. So that would be an example of testing a known idea with a new community. Or maybe something like growing okra is lucrative for a community in New Jersey, but in Maine, farmers don't grow it much. So maybe you would want to test its production and marketability in that area. So those are all fine projects and eligible for SARE grants. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the technical advisor. You are required to have a technical advisor for your project. The role of the advisor is to provide support to you as the grant applicant, support such as helping you design your project, reviewing your proposal, assisting with outreach, or troubleshooting issues that come up during your proposal or during your project, excuse me. The technical advisor could be an extension educator or university researcher, could be a private consultant, a veterinarian, NRCS or other government staff, nonprofit or for-profit ag service providers, or any other technical expert, including another farmer. Really, anybody who has experience and knowledge in your topic area who is outside of your circle. It shouldn't be a family member or someone who is close to you. On our website, you can find a guide for technical advisors, which describes their role and can help them understand their responsibility. And I suggest that you share this with the person you're asking to be your technical advisor. On our website, we also have videos of some farmers and their technical advisors describing how they work together. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tommye. Tommye Lou Rafes of TL Fruits and Vegetables, and she'll tell you a little bit about her experience applying for SARE grants. So Tommye, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tommye, and I am a retired public school teacher, and I own a small family farm called TL Fruits and Vegetables, where we grow fruits and vegetables, and we're located in the southern part of West Virginia. I am a no-till farm, and we have 4 high tunnels. I grow year-round, and I also offer a farm CSA program. So my first grant that I applied for was in 2018, and I heard about SARE while I was at a Good Agricultural Practices workshop. One of the presenters told us about farmer grants, and I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I came home and talked about it with my husband. I called and I visited with my county extension agent. And we talked about how most people in West Virginia who had high tunnels, and at that time we had about 600 people with high tunnels, we could only count maybe 4 or 5 on our hands that actually were growing fruits and vegetables or even using their high tunnels during the fall, winter, or spring months. In other words, most people were using those high tunnels just for the summer season. And one of the problems we felt was temperature. Obviously, it gets cold in West Virginia. We have high winds during the fall and the winter, and the temperature fluctuates so much. You know, if the sun comes out, it gets really hot. When the sun goes down, it gets really cold. So you have to open and close your high tunnels in order to successfully grow during the winter months. So that's what that high tunnel, or what that experiment was about in 2018. We used a automated sidewall curtain mechanism to ventilate the high tunnels. In 2020, we applied again, and this time it was titled Low Cost Self-Sustaining Year-Round High Tunnel Temperature Control. And in this experiment, I got the idea from our horticulturalist at our state agricultural school. He said that he had seen geothermal high tunnels successfully grow during the winter months in Indiana, but he didn't know of anyone in the state of West Virginia that had a geothermal high tunnel. So my husband and I talked about it. We did some research, and we decided that we would build a high tunnel. So that was our 4th one, and we would make a geothermal one. And we were testing to see if we could grow successfully without having to use low tunnels or ground covers, or even you know, those cloths that you put over to protect your crops during the winter months. And it worked out great. 2022, we applied again, and this time we were using that same high tunnel, the geothermal high tunnel. But when we had built it, we had also included a climate battery system. And we also had buried our pipes underground for the geothermal at different levels. And we also used different material. So part of the pipes were buried in soil, part of the pipes were actually buried in gravel. And the reason we did that is when we were doing our research on building the geothermal high tunnel, there was no definitive answer as to which material was the best material to use. So we decided we would test that. The pipe depth, the reason we had different pipe depth was simply we ran into rock when we were digging to do our geothermal. So some of our pipes are at a 4 foot and some are at an 8 foot depth. And so again, we can test to see how well the climate battery holds onto that temperature exchange. So when you apply for a SARE grant, at least when I applied for a SARE grant, what I did first was I looked for a problem that I had on my farm. I also looked to see if that was a problem that other local growers in my area were having, and then across my state. And then after I identified that problem, I talked to my county extension agent to see if he knew a solution to the problem. I also talked to my state horticulturalist at our state agricultural school. And if no one had a solution, then I actually went to the SARE website and looked at if other people had applied for a grant and what solutions they had come up with. After that, if I still couldn't find a viable solution, I Googled it and I went to YouTube and looked to see if anybody else had solved the problem. And after I had figured there was no solution to the problem, then I had to ask myself, is this something that I could do? Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right materials? Do I have the manpower? Do I have the supplies that I need to run this experiment? And most importantly, do I have the time to do that experiment? I tend to be really busy during the summer months as a farmer. I'm growing, I'm weeding, I'm harvesting, I'm washing, and then I'm selling my produce. So for me to run an experiment and have the time to do it, I find that the winter months are better for me. And so I tend to try to gravitate toward SARE programs that I can collect data and analyze that data during the winter months. I also look at my employees that I have and I make sure that they're all in. So I have volunteers that work at my farm. I should say that I'm a woman-owned and a woman-run farm, and the women who work for me are my age or older. So we're all retired professionals. So I have to look at, you know, can we physically do it? Are we strong enough? And do we have the ability to run these experiments? And once we are awarded a grant, I put together everything in a notebook. I'm a retired teacher, so organizing in a notebook works well for me. I have a meeting with all of our volunteers, all of our employees. We divide up the tasks. We talk about who can be responsible for what part. Again, because I'm a school teacher, I like to use Excel and put up data tables, and I make sure everyone's comfortable in filling out those data tables. Is everything, you know, are they comfortable with the units of measurements that we're using? Because we work on a farm and we have dirt and mud, I use clipboards and I cover everything with the plastic, you know, cover to keep it clean and tidy. And I have the clipboards hanging up where they're easily accessible. There's been problems when we're trying to collect our data. One of the problems that we ran into with our experiment is we get a lot of snowfall in West Virginia, and sometimes that snowfall is heavy, and sometimes it will melt and then freeze, and so it's solid ice. And so sometimes it'll freeze the mechanism for our automated sidewall curtains. We've burned out the motors. We've had to order new equipment. We had a new puppy that ran through one of our experiments and damaged the plant, so we had to replant, and that took us off our normal schedule. We have a no-till farm, and so we end up having a lot of underground critter problems. So we have mice, we have rabbits, we have voles, we have moles, we have groundhogs, and they've caused problems when I'm trying to run my experiments. And of course, you have equipment failure as well. So you have to plan ahead, be flexible. I certainly keep all of my emails and all of my conversations that I have with my SARE experts, as well as my county extension agent. And I put that all in my notebook. And my biggest advice is to make sure you ask for help when you need help and accept the fact that you can't do it all yourself. And I think it's gratifying as a farmer to know that SARE validates that I do have problems on my farm and that they're worth testing and trying and sharing that information with other people. So I look forward to any questions in any way that I can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommye. I'm going to just go through these pictures here. Maybe you could just tell
Okay.
us if I can get my computer to behave. Let's see.
I will say when I write up my my grant application, I try to have someone read over it that's not a farmer. What makes sense in my head may not make sense to someone else. My husband's not a farmer, and he tends to proofread all of my writing, and so he'll say, this just doesn't make sense. I don't understand. What you're looking at there is our solar panel, and we used one solar panel to test the automated sidewall curtains. So the high tunnel that's closest to the solar power actually ran the mechanism. And, you know, we had to learn about solar energy. We had never installed a solar panel before. Now, I should say that our farm is all alternative energy because we do have enough solar power on our barn, but we ourselves have never installed it and have never used it for a direct source of energy. So that was a learning experiment, you know, finding out how to use that. The high tunnel that's behind that one was on the grid. So we were testing on the grid energy versus solar energy. Okay, you can go to the next one. This is the high tunnel with the geothermal, and you see on the right side and the left side, if you look on the two edges, there's those black pipes that are coming up that look like barrels. That's actually the tunnel. So we have all of our air circulating up through there. So there's actually a fan attached to the top of that that's helping circulate the air. And then on the far left side, we have where the pipes are coming through these boxes. And we have them all color-coded and numbered, so we know how far they're down and whether they're buried in gravel or if they're buried in soil. This is all the crazy mechanism that we had to figure out how to use. We ended up using these batteries, and you can see that they're insulated in a foaming material, and you have to do that to protect the batteries and to keep them in a temperature control. We've had mice get in there, so there's all kinds of problems that happen. But so we have this to where we have a wind turbine as well as solar panels, and we're able to control those fans, and that's what helped regulates the temperature. And snowfall is a real problem. I guess on the far right one, you can see that's our wind turbine. And I have to tell you, that wind turbine is the coolest thing ever. And we collect a lot of energy from that one wind turbine during the winter months. Summer, not so much, but we get some really strong winds. Those solar panels that are in that picture, we started with, I think we had 4, and then we went to 6, and then we went to 8. And we ended up having to use 10 solar panels to get enough energy to actually power those fans and to have that run 24 hours a day. We also have those solar panels on a crank system, so we can change the angle. You know, the sun's rays come at a different angle during the winter months, and so we're able to change the angle of those solar panels. We've learned a lot. I have to say, we've learned about solar energy, battery, how to store that energy. We've learned a ton.
Well, thank you very much, Tommye. The work you're doing is really very exciting, and I appreciate your sharing your experience and your insight into your SARE experience. That's terrific. So we're going to pause here and answer any questions that you may have so far for me or for Tommye. And before we bring in the questions from the chat, I want to address a couple of questions that came in from registration. There's first, we always get a lot of questions about what topics SARE is most likely to support. And I just want to say that Northeast SARE does not typically predetermine topics for priority, but rather we leave it to the applicants to make their case to reviewers that a topic area is highly needed. So providing convincing evidence that farmers are interested in your work helps reviewers understand the extent of the need you are seeking to address. And you heard Tommye say that that's what she looked into as well. Somebody asked, how do I find an advisor? Well, if you have trouble finding a technical advisor, you could contact your local extension office or local farm service agencies for suggestions, or you could contact your SARE state coordinator to see if they can recommend someone. They cannot be technical advisors on your project, but they can recommend people. And we have a SARE representative in each state, and you can find their contact information on our website. Someone asked, is there help applying? Well, you can call me anytime if you have questions about the application process. But if you need help developing your proposal or would like someone to review it before submission, you can hopefully get help from your technical advisor or contact another peer or professional who has grant writing experience. Do you have resources or people that can refer me to for manufacturing and engineers for blueprints of my invention? We do not have those resources, so you would need to research that on your own. Are collaborative projects favored over single farm projects? They're not favored, but we do encourage collaboration. However, only one farmer can be the project leader. So that's the person who will manage the project, be our point of contact, and handle the finances. What does the reporting look like if a grant is awarded? You will be required to submit annual and final technical reports online in our grants management system. Further information about what to expect if your project is funded can be found in the call for proposals and on our website. And then somebody asked again, are the grant funds lump sum dispersals or as reimbursement for amounts spent by the applicant? So as I said, the funds are dispersed as reimbursements. You will need to track your expenses and keep your receipts and then periodically send us invoices. All expenses must have proof of payment and be within your budget. Now, Vander, do we have some questions in the chat?
Yes, we do. So first question here from Sarah, can a technical advisor be a university student?
Yes, they can, as long as they have the expertise that you need for your project. That's what reviewers will be looking at to see if the technical advisor is qualified to help you with your project.
Fantastic. Dominic would like to know, can we explore data collection requirements?
Data collection requirements. I'm not really sure what you're asking. It would depend on your project. You'll want to collect enough data to have meaningful results. And I would suggest, if you are unsure as to what that would be, that you work with your technical advisor to design your experiment and figure out the data that you do need to collect to be able to answer the questions you're asking in a meaningful way.
Elizabeth would like to know, when the grant includes wages paid to farm owners, operators, how do those wages need to be paid? For example, do the owners need to be W-2 employees, or can an owner's draw be acceptable?
Or what was that last phrase you said, an owner's?
An owner's draw be acceptable. So I'm not quite familiar with that phrasing myself. But
I'm not.
Do you require a W-2, I think would be the.
Yeah, so we do of the person of the farmer that we are contracting with. If a farmer is paying other people on the grant, then those people would just work with the farmer with the tax situation and the W-2s and all that, but we do need to get a W-2 from farmers in order to be able to pay the reimbursements.
Liliana would like to know, do you have a format for the grant application or for the reports that will be due following the project time period?
Well, the grant application format, you can find that all in the call for proposals. And the reporting system is on our website. It's the SARE projects database, and you could go into that and look at other reports if you'd like to see what that looks like. But it is basically a template, and where you just simply answer the questions. And so you're guided through all the information that we would like to get from you.
We have a question from Trevon, who's asking, where can you locate grants available? And I can say you can look at northeastsare.org. And this is northeastsare.org/farmer grant for this grant program. Anonymous attendee would like to know, does the grant require a match from the farm?
No cost sharing, no matches required.
A flag would like to know, do I need to have a large formal business plan to submit, or are 2 to 3 pages okay?
Well, we don't require a business plan for your business. We do have, the proposal is for your project that you're going to do. So you will need to have a plan of work for your project. And I'm going to be going over all those questions that we ask of you in the next section. So maybe we have just one more and then we should move on.
Okie dokie. And yeah, please continue to submit your questions. We are going to be pausing again to answer more. Ben would like to know, are there limits to equipment costs covered by the grant program?
Yes, and I'm going to go over that shortly as well in this next section. So perfect segue, because now we're going to go into a little more detail about what you need to do to apply. So you have an idea and you've identified a technical advisor. The next step is to design your project. And this is something your technical advisor could help with. It's also important to read the call for proposals so you have the overview of all the information you'll need to provide. You want to be clear about what the problem or the issue is that you want to address, and you want to identify your objectives. Then think about the best way to achieve those objectives and answer your questions you're asking. An experimental design might include field trials, on-farm demonstrations, case studies, or other techniques. And you'll also want to identify your budget. Make sure you consider all the costs involved in doing the project. For help developing a research project, you could check out the SARE publication on our website called How to Conduct Research on Your Farm. So for your proposal, you will need to put together a detailed budget and justification of the expenses for your project. On our website is an Excel spreadsheet template for this, where you will identify each expense, why you need it, and the cost in terms of unit, quantity, and price. It's important to look at actual prices and provide those, because we will want to see what you're basing your amounts on. This is all explained in detail in the call for proposals, and there's also a full example of a budget in there. But we want real numbers. If at the time of the expense, the amounts are a little different, that's fine. But for the purposes of the budget, it needs to be realistic at the time of the proposal. All of the expenses must happen during the contract period. We can't cover anything that was paid before or after. And contracts will start March 1st, and your end date will be set based on the time you need to do your project. And your budget cannot exceed $30,000. So let's go over what SARE does and does not fund. The type of expenses that are covered are personnel time. That could be your time that is extra that the project is requiring, or time of one of your employees. Materials and supplies like flagging, seed, collection vials, rope, that sort of thing. Travel, sometimes you have to travel, maybe as part of the study or for outreach to present your results. Printing and publications, you might want to print a flyer for a field day or a fact sheet, or maybe you want to print guides with your study results. Other direct costs could include things like equipment rental, soil tests, consultant fees, but everything you request must be everything you request funding for must be specific to your SARE project. Some expenses we don't cover are business or farm startup costs. There may be other programs for that in your area, so you could check with your local extension office or other farmer organizations if you need startup money. We can't pay for you to build a structure like a barn or do a major renovation. We can't cover the purchase of equipment unless it's specialized equipment that will only be used for the project. And likewise, we won't cover labor or operating expenses for your normal farm operation. However, if you're putting in extra time to do the study, you can request that under personnel. For example, time spent recording data on collected eggs for the study is eligible, but time spent collecting eggs that you would normally be collecting anyway is not eligible. We can't cover motor vehicles or cell phones and cell charges. Food is not allowed unless it's necessary for the continuity of a meeting, and we can't pay for any swag or gifts. So here are, let's see. Oh, here are some tips for creating your budget. People often ask how much they should charge for labor. We don't have a specific amount, but we do want you to be compensated for your time on the project and encourage you to request a realistic and fair wage. Project collaborators can certainly be paid for. I'm sorry, but I think this is oh, okay, I think I'm missing a slide there, but project collaborators can certainly be paid, but be sure to fully explain what they'll be doing. So just going back to equipment though, SARE will only fund equipment that is necessary for the project and something you would not normally use for your current operation. If the equipment will have no use after the project, then the expense would be eligible at 100%. However, if it is a piece of equipment that would have use on your farm or other farms after the project, you would only be allowed to request a prorated amount based on its usable life. As an example, here the farm needed a microscope for their project, but they didn't have one. SARE prefers that the equipment be rented, but sometimes that's just not feasible. So in that case, you'll need to purchase the item and you can request reimbursement at a prorated amount. Here, the microscope is considered to have a useful life of 10 years. It costs $1,600. And since the project is a 2-year project, SARE would pay 20% of the cost or $320. If they had found a rental option for the microscope, it would go under the next line, rental of equipment. In this particular example, however, they needed more land to do their project, so they've included that in their budget as a rental charge. If you have any questions about how to put equipment into your budget, there's more information and examples in the call for proposals, and you can always contact me with any further questions. All right. More tips for creating your budget. Reviewers will look at higher funding requests to be related to more complex projects where there might be collaboration with other farmers you're paying for their time. More outreach in the form of events or publications, or more intensive research where you replicate it over multiple sites or years and then analyze the results using statistics. But we do also encourage simpler projects with smaller budgets. And these can be just as competitive as bigger projects. Someone asked, how small of a project is too small? Well, really no project is too small. Just be sure to make your case as to why the work is important and how it could be needed and used by other farmers. Now, the proposal itself is a series of questions. We highly recommend that you prepare your answers to the questions before entering them into the online system. In the call for proposals, there's a link to a Word doc format of these questions. It's called the Proposal Prep Worksheet. You can use this to prepare your answers and pay attention to the fact that there are word limits for each section or each question. When complete, you can paste your answers into the online system, but be sure to review the final document to be sure everything looks as you expect it to. Now, this is what you'll see in the worksheet. First is the proposal summary, which is a standalone summary of the product, of the project, it should briefly describe the issue, the objectives, the key components of your plan of work, and your outreach strategy. Since this is the first thing reviewers will see, we recommend taking some time to make this clear and compelling. Next, describe your experience, your farm, and what resources you have. Reviewers want to know that you are eligible for the grant and that you will be able to carry out the project. Then describe what the problem is, the issue or the opportunity that you are addressing. Why is it important? What can you do to make it better? As said before, provide convincing evidence that farmers are interested in this work and the extent of the need. Then there's an optional question that asks if and how your project involves historically underserved farmers. It's not required to do this. However, proposals that advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice will be elevated by reviewers in the final ranking in relation to proposals that do not. Next, you want to discuss previous work, look back at what's already been tried and how your project builds on existing efforts. You may want to cite studies and articles to demonstrate your knowledge of current research. And then you'll want to provide a list of citations that you reference under previous work, as well as anywhere else in your proposal. Next, you'll clearly state your objectives, preferably in a numbered list. Be specific in stating the questions you're asking. Then your methods. Reviewers want to know that your methods will get you to results that are meaningful and will answer your questions. Be specific and state exactly what you're planning to do, how you plan to do it, and when. You could think of this as like a guide to your procedures. For instance, if you'll be collecting samples, be specific about how many samples, how you will handle the samples, when you will collect them, the tools you will use. Just be very specific and detailed. This is also where you can upload any diagrams, sample questionnaires, or anything that could help reviewers understand what you're going to do and how. You'll then describe your outreach plan. Explain what you're going to do to tell farmers about your projects and results. This could be demonstrations, twilight meetings, presentations, a guide, video. There are many options, and it doesn't have to be an in-person event. We have a resource on our website called Conducting Online Outreach, and that could give you ideas. And then provide a timeline. Lay out each activity for your methods and outreach, when, who will do them, and how long it will take. Lastly, you'll need to provide a summary of your budget, which are figures taken directly from your spreadsheet. You should gather all the required attachments ahead of time because they need to be submitted with your proposal by the deadline. All applicants are required to attach a letter of a commitment from their technical advisor and attach the budget justification and narrative spreadsheet. And then there are some other cases. If you are not the farm owner, but an employee of a farm, you're required to submit a grant commitment form that is signed by the farm owner or an authorized official from the organization. If you're collaborating with other farmers or professionals, you need to obtain and submit a letter of commitment from them. And if there's something that would be relevant to your research, such as a plot layout, a survey tool, as we said before, you should submit those as well. Now, there are two final questions in the proposal that don't apply to everyone regarding human subjects and livestock. If you aren't working with either of these, then you can answer no to each one and move on. The USDA requires that projects are done in accordance with protections for people and vertebrate animals. So if you are working with either of these groups, you need to answer the relevant questions. This is described more in the call for proposals, and if you have any questions about whether it applies to you, please contact me. So for some tips for submitting a strong proposal, make sure that your project is a good match for SARE, that you're eligible, and that your project will benefit farmers in the Northeast. Start early. Previous applicants have reported that developing and submitting a proposal can take up to 40 hours. For most, maybe it only takes 10 or 20 though. Also, be sure to discuss your project with your technical advisor well in advance. Prepare your proposal offline and ask others to review it. Write with reviewers in mind. Reviewers have broad agricultural expertise, but may not be deeply familiar with your topic. So avoid unnecessary jargon and make it clear and easy for reviewers to understand what you're going to do and why. Think your project through and Figure out the expenses you will need to make. Don't pull numbers out of a hat, but get real pricing. And remember the attachments. Don't wait until the last minute to get letters or signatures. Now, the deadline for the farmer grant proposals is 5 p.m. on November 15th, and they do need to be submitted online with all the attachments. So be sure to leave yourself extra time in case you have some glitches or technical difficulties. Proposals must be complete and will not be accepted after 5 p.m. The proposals then move forward through the review process and results are announced at the end of February. For awarded projects, we'll be issuing contracts in March. And if your proposal is not accepted for a grant, we will send you comments from reviewers so that you can understand how you could improve your proposal if you would like to resubmit next year. Next, I'm going to be going over how to enter your proposal online very briefly because we're getting close to the end. But first, let's pause and just answer a few questions. I do have just a couple more from registrations. Do I need to have a farm ID number to be eligible for this grant? No, no ID number necessary. Can farmers partner with academic institutions to conduct their project? Yes, people with expertise that is needed for your project can be collaborators. However, they do not need to be from academic institutions. And somebody had asked if it was a cost share program, and no, it's not. We do not provide funds to defray cost. We specifically fund research and education projects. So Vander, maybe 2 minutes of questions from the chat.
Absolutely. Let's go through these quickly here. We got a lot. Is there a minimum year's experience necessary to be defined as a farmer?
Not experience, just the selling of produce for a year prior.
Is mobile cold storage considered specialized equipment, and would it be an allowable expense?
It depends. Yep, it depends on its role in the project. Reviewers would need to see what your project is, and then they would make the determination as to whether it's required for the project. And if so, then it would be allowable.
Katie asks, if the organization is a not-for-profit and entirely volunteer run, is there any compensation for labor available?
Yes, you can build that into your budget.
William asks, I'm looking for solar energy source for my education project to keep the system up and avoid damage in hydroponics and aquaponics. And it's in Puerto Rico. That apply for a project?
No, Puerto Rico would be, you could apply for a project through Southern SARE, the southern region of SARE.
If the cost of a project exceeds 30K, do we list the full cost and only expect to receive reimbursement of 30, or do we write it to fit within?
You would write your budget to fit within, but it would be really valuable to, in the proposal, state how you will cover the rest of the expenses, because reviewers would look at that project and say, well, they're not going to be able to do the whole thing for what they're asking. You know, how is it going to get done? So if you explain how it's going to get done in the proposal, that would be extremely valuable. But for the budget itself, we only need to see what you are requesting funds from SARE for.
And I think, yep, you've answered is either more to be selected there. To what extent does the project need to be experimental?
Experimental. I'm not sure. I think you're asking if it needs to be like an experimental research project where you're doing trials or that sort of thing. It can be a social science project as well, where you're doing case studies or, you know, taking surveys, or the goal of the project is to be having a question that you're asking, and that you see that is a problem for farmers, and then through your study you're going to test possible solution, or you're going to try to understand something further to be able to share with other farmers to help them in their farming.
All right, and I think we should be continuing on here.
All right. Great. Thank you, Vander. And if we didn't get to your question, Vander will have them in the chat and he can send them to me, and we can post or send out to everybody the answers to the rest ones we didn't get to. So this last section, very briefly, shows you how to submit your proposal online. I'm going to go through it quickly, but there is a video on our website that walks you through how to apply for our grants through our grants management system. So you started with an idea, you got met with your technical advisor, you read the call, you prepared your answers, and now you're going to go to the grants management system to submit your proposal. That's at this URL, projects.sare.org, and you'll find that in the call for proposals. If you've applied before, you'll already have an account. This is the same system where we submit reports, so you can use the same login. If not, you'll click here and follow the prompts to create an account. Once you're logged in, you'll land on your project's home page and you'll see a link to start a new grants proposal. The system is used for all the SARE regions, so you have to make some choices here. Click on the plus sign to the left of Northeast and you'll see a box for the 2023 Northeast Farmer Grant. Here, you need to click on Begin a New Proposal. Now, you are into the proposal submission, and there's a link back to the call for proposals, which again, make sure you read thoroughly. And the first thing you will enter is your title. You do that by clicking Edit Title, and then enter a short project description. There's also a button to change the project leader, but the project leader should really be the one entering the proposal, so you shouldn't need to use this button. But if you have some issue with entering the proposal and you need to have somebody else to do it for some reason, please contact me to discuss it, and I can help you get through that. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to apply. Then below that, you'll see the proposal question sections that you prepared on your Word document, possibly. Read the overview, and then click on each of the sections to answer the proposal questions. In order to answer each question, you need to click Edit Answer, then put in your answer. Here it's a date, but it could be a text box or a field for contact information. And then you need to click Save in order for your answer to be saved. If you move on without clicking Save, you'll find that when you go back to it, your answer won't be there. So when you click Save, you'll see the little box that says Answer Saved, so you'll know that it'll be there. At any time, you can preview a draft of your proposal by clicking View Draft at the top. You can also use that to share your proposal with someone like your technical advisor if you want them to review it. You can tell that all your answers are saved if you see green checks on the side of that category. If there's a red asterisk, it means that there's an answer still missing. And once all of the question sections are answered completely, the Submit Proposal button will show up in the bottom left corner. If you're ready to submit, it's a two-step process. You'll click Submit Proposal here, and then you'll see the screen again where it's asking if you're sure you want to submit, and you'll click Submit Proposal again. You'll then receive a confirmation email. So be sure, check for that confirmation email to be sure that your proposal has gone through. On our website, you'll find all the resources that you need, the call for proposals, which includes step-by-step instructions, an Excel template for the required budget narrative and justification, the grant commitment form if you're not a farm owner, and other resources that we mentioned today. Now, if you have any specific challenges in submitting your proposal, please reach out to us so we can assist you in getting it submitted by the deadline. Also, we want to hear if you will have any challenges with resources that could affect your project. So there's a question in the proposal that you can answer regarding that, and it could help reviewers understand more about your project. So we covered a lot of information today. Again, this webinar will be posted on our website, so you can refer back to it if you would like later. And at any point along the way, feel free to contact me with questions. Here's my contact information. It's also in the call for proposals. And I want to thank Tommye for joining us today. It was terrific information that she provided and really exciting to hear about her projects. And I think we have like a minute or 1 minute. We could address another question if we have one. Otherwise, we will be sending out to all registrants questions that we didn't get to and their answers.
We had multiple people ask, do high tunnels count as structures?
High tunnels, that's an interesting question. High tunnels do count as structures, and so, but it depends on how they're being used, and people have different understandings of the term high tunnels. For some people, it's more like a greenhouse. For some people, it's more like a season extender. it's a permanent structure, we would not fund it. If it's a temporary structure, we could fund it at least prorated, if not fully.
Fantastic. And yet we're coming up on the end here. Resources for grant writing assistance.
We do not have any available through us, but you could check with your technical advisor, check with your local extension agent for people who, and just keep an eye out for programs and grant writing.
And you can always look at projects.sare.org and check out other projects to get an idea of what kind of language and things are used. Thanks everybody for attending. It is 1 o'clock now. We know everyone's got to get back to busy days. Keep an eye out for the recording. Thank you, Tommye, and thank you, Candice. So like big round of applause for y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.